once again. We are here with Nick, and we are going to be learning more and more about magic as we go along. We've spoken with him a couple times now, and yeah, what do you have to share with us today, Nick?
So today, it's going to be more of a continuation on the Hermetic laws, which is no matter, like believe I also said it in the first episode, that no matter what kind of system of magic you're using, whether it's Golden Dawn, which is high ritual magic, low folk magic, which like Wicca and witchcraft, or even it's just something as simple as candle magic, and nothing more, doesn't matter what you will have to learn and follow all these seven Hermetic laws to even have even remotely a good or even successful practice. So, so we've already gone over at least a couple of them. So first we went through law of mentalism, which, as most would know, everything begins in the mind. So we're not really going through any specific order. And then last week we covered heavily on the law of polarity, which is going to be a very big and important law, because you'll actually see it reverberate in many different aspects in life, as well as even the other Hermetic laws. Actually, all the laws kind of intertwine with each other. Like as we mentioned last week, was how law of polarity also talks about the polarization within ourselves. And of course, this means, like the mind as well, like what we're tied to, what can pull us, what inspires us, what moves us. So, and of course, it's not just, that, it's even about the archetypes as well, because we have pushing, we have pulling, we have white magic, we have black magic, we got up and down, masculine, feminine, negative, positive, etc. And of course, and with that being said, I just want to reiterate and express the importance as well, when it comes to polarization, as well as being, just being polarized oneself. Because as we talked about in the first episode, what separates a magician versus someone who's not a magician? Because if everyone's always doing magic, even average Joe Schmo works 9 to 5, doesn't know the first thing about anything esoteric in the slightest. Even he's doing magic, like whenever he goes to the pub, whenever he comes back home, always everything he says. But of course, he doesn't know it. And of course, with that being said, that also leaves him very vulnerable to outside influences as well. Because, like I mentioned, controlling your own magic, which also means controlling your own mind, is one of the first key parts of being able to do magic to begin with. All changes, if anyone wants to do changes without, they have to start changing things within. Even in mysticism, this is also taught, which is why I will always reiterate, before one becomes an occultist or a magician, be a mystic first. Learn basic things like astrology, astrotheology, even meditation, any of things that fall under or near those categories. Very important to know. And well, in any case, so as we stated last week, polarization, being polarized, is like having a string, right? Like, and I know some things here I'm gonna repeat a lot. And having these strings, gives you the ability to either move yourself or be moved by someone else. And the magician, even though the magician is depolarized, but of course, as human beings, we're always going to be polarized towards something, right? It's never, being 100% completely depolarized would mean you're dead, because in electromagnetism, polarization is a sign of life. Of course, we're alive, but by consequence, that also means we're going to get polarized. But in any case, stress again that even though we're polarized towards something, whatever that could be, it's always important to understand how those strings pull us. Because if we're aware of it, then at that point we can make the choice to either allow or deny it to pull us. Because there are times where we should act on something, and other times we don't, even if we feel like it's the right thing to do. But lots of nuances and circumstances in the world could always, influence that. But anyways, now with that out of the way, when it comes to polarization always being two, next law we're going to talk about is the law of gender. So masculine and feminine, and who would have thought? Turns out there's only two, unlike what some people in the West would have you believe. So that's a plot twist most probably didn't see coming. I guess, well, technically, I guess there'll be three, but the third one's not necessarily a gender. It's, masculine, feminine, then neuter or neutral. But for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to stick to two. And and just as a quick sidetrack back to what I say about polarization, certain groups you mentioned this to anyone, and next thing you know, they just go completely off. That's one example of polarization, or at least another one. You can find many, as we talked about last week.
Mm-hmm.
So, so the law of gender. So, as it states in even in the Kabbalion, which talks about these hermetic principles, creation um, can only happen and occur when we have these two principles, right? And this happens on every single level of creation, and it's not even just one like biological or physical. This even occurs even in the spiritual and mental planes too, right? And of course, whether man or woman, when we all have these same principles, naturally, of course, men have more of the masculine principle and only a tiny bit of feminine. Vice versa for the women with the feminine and masculine, right? But in the end, for any kind of creation or anything substantial to come, always needs to be brought together. Hang on.
Hmm.
Let me see.
So, with that being said, do you think it like having two humans of the opposite sex, like you can have more manifestation power than if you were to do it by yourself?
Um, Probably. There's definitely going to be more. There's definitely going to be aspects to that that are definitely going to contribute to that. I would say definitely it depends what it is. Obviously, if I'm creating for a new human being, I mean, yeah, you're going to need both.
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely like sex magic. I mean, well, of course, because the whole universe is a sex-based universe. Is its duality. I mean, obviously, it's a twofold, or sorry, 12-fold, but in a simplistic form, it is a dualistic form. So
Mhm.
I always say that the universe is like a twofold joke. It's both a sex joke as well as a pun at the same time. So yeah, creation can only occur when you bring these two principles together. But another thing to also keep in mind when it comes to um, studying these two principles is not just smushing together and see what sticks. There's a sex joke in there somewhere, but it's also understanding how they work too, right? Like you can't just say like, oh, I have both equal 50-51. It doesn't quite work that way.
Mm.
Um, and I'm not even, and of course, I'm not just talking about even just within, uh, a single man versus a single woman as well. Like, yeah, the balances are not going to be 50-50, and they really shouldn't be. But however, there is a balance within the two anyway. Of that, and we're going to talk about more about that later. But anyway, so like I said, understanding the roles that they play. So yes, we're going to also get into a bit into gender roles as well, because the power of the feminine and power of the masculine work differently. Both are powerful forces, however, by themselves, like I mentioned before, not enough to create something, at least nothing substantial. Like at best by themselves, they can maybe, and I'm just being generous here, very generous, maybe create a crumb. But if you want to make that whole loaf of bread, you got to bring them together. And of course, much like even in a band, right? You have your drummers, you have your guitar players. You don't ask the guitar player to be a drummer. You don't ask the drummer to be a guitar player. Generally speaking, let's just assume that the respective musicians only know this, what those two instruments respectively. But anyhow, so we're definitely going to go over this later because this is going to be a very important aspect. So within us, like I mentioned before, whether you're a man or woman, we all have those same principles, right? Both masculine and feminine. So we all have a left brain, masculine, logic, conscious, aware aspect, right? And this is what allows us to see what's in front of us, and also what allows us to discern too, and what to accept or to reject. And of course, we have an emotional side. That's the feminine, intuitive, creative side, right? And when it comes to having magic manifest as well, you have to bring those two together. And like I said before, you have to understand the rules. So the emotional feminine side, which is also the subconscious too, is the one that usually has things manifest, right? We've always been taught that that feminine principle is the one with the connection to the divine, and absolutely true. However, here's the thing about that: that connection can be described either one of two ways. It can either be described as a connection that's a little bit too good, and it connects to everything, not just the good, but also the bad. And or it can be viewed as a flawed connection, where it has just enough of a good signal to receive something, but because that connection is not secure, other things can hijack it. So, however you want to look at it, that's something important to know. Another, which is why when we go back to the masculine principle, which may not have the direct connection to the divine, he can only see the divine through that feminine. He can actually see what's in front of him, and he can also has the ability to perfect that connection, to reject what's bad and only accept what's good, right? And this principle is going to be present on practically every single level, And I know from even like the transcendental high to internal, and even is reflected even in actual relationships. I know some people are going to be might be a little bit averse to this. I know some people are going to be very put off with even the whole concept of, say, traditional gender roles in a relationship in a household as well. And while this might seem a little bit off topic, but it's still related in some capacity. And this is from what I've seen. And so on social media, even in the recent few months, I'm not sure how far back it started, but I do know it's a thing that's starting to spool up again. Whereas where the past few decades as well, we have had this very postmodern idea of relationships as well, where it's always like a 50-50, both are making decisions as well. And of course, this is based on observations and even testimonies based on so many people that are following this trend, where they start to falling back, where where the woman starts going, staying at home, being the caretaker and the homemaker, and the man's usually like the breadwinner, the one that goes out to work, comes back, and is head of the household and all that. Again, I know some people are going to be a little averse to that for one reason or another, which again is another example of polarization. But it actually has been noted that that people who started doing this actually have said that their relationship has not only improved, but has only gone stronger. And even themselves, they even feel better as well. Why? Because the universal mechanics within them are flowing the way they're supposed to, right? And of course, I'm not telling anyone how to carry out the relationship, right? Like if, whatever it is you have going, if it's working out for you, then, obviously great. The only thing I would say is, consider the words I have to say, as well as, be honest, like not necessarily with me, but, with yourself. And if you're in a relationship, then consequently, even your partner too. But nevertheless, this also shows that when you understand how these principles work and you put them in the right place, then that's how heaven is created. And I know that seems to venture a little bit off of Magick and more into social politics, but only reason I'm going there is because same principles are played out on every single level. So if we want to go back to something more esoteric, like say the transcendental level, so say in the transcendental, in the ether, you have dielectric, which is masculine, rest, convergence, gravitation, and magnetic, which is the white light. So black light for dielectric, and the white light, Radharani, radiation, expanding, moving forward. And of course, people would say it's like, oh, it's the most powerful energy, and it will dominate all. Well, even in that same level, the same thing still happens, right? So we have, so of course we have, say, magnetism. So this is the unstoppable force, right? It's going to keep moving. Doesn't matter what, it's going to keep going, right? Nothing will stop her. And then of course we have the immovable object, dielectricity, dielectricity, masculine. So this is not moving. This is going to keep moving. So what happens when these two meet? Well, she surrenders, right? She has, in order for this to keep moving, where's it going to go? It's going to follow around. It's going to create that friction. It's going to create that heat, that hypercharged electricity, which and thus creation. So even in the transcendental, same principle. Even down here in the mundane physical, same principles. of course, barring nuances and circumstances, right? Like I said, how anyone chooses to go with those things, up to them. All I can say is just be honest, and you know, be with yourself and your partner as well. I mean, there will always be outliers in any kind of demographic, but just be careful not to assume oneself to be an outlier, because if you're wrong, well, you're going to suffer for it. Your relationship's going to suffer for it. But in any case, now back to, even without, as above as below, and as without to within. Now back within us. So like I mentioned before, we all have the feminine and masculine principles. So for magic to manifest, we have to follow these rules. So like I mentioned before, our conscious mind, the masculine principle, versus the subconscious mind, which is the one that's going to doing all the um, pretty much literally all the magic, in the sense of getting things to work and manifest. But of course, for her to do that, so we can think of it as even our internal husband versus our internal wife, or if we want to get biblical, our internal Adam, our internal Eve. So in order for Eve to start bringing in the heaven that is desired, we have to give her that instruction, which is really partly why we do ritual to begin with, why we have these grand dramas, why we have these grand gestures, so why we put on robes, why we make it dark, why we light up a candle, why we sing mantras or have certain songs playing in the background, all of this, and why we use sigils too, which we will get into in the future, and all the symbology. It's to make that impression. You can almost think of it as, if like internal husband, internal wife, it's like the boy or the guy taking the girl out on a date. He wants to impress her. He wants to show her a good time. He takes her to the park, maybe to a fireworks show, to a movie, to a restaurant. All this to make that impression upon her. So it's like, oh, hey, I want to stick with this guy. I want to go and follow him. And subconscious works in pretty much in that similar manner. So, but of course, mere words, mere telling is not enough. We have to do these grand gestures to really make that impression. And of course, the suggestibility of one's subconscious will differ from person to person. Of course, comes with training as well, which is one of the reasons why, when it comes to magic, it's not just knowing protocol. More often than not, I would hear people kind of, call these people, armchair magicians, or people who sit on the armchair of no knowledge, because they know protocol, but without practicing. And when it comes to magic, at the very least, actually experiencing and doing is what will give you the true insight on it. Because we can know how to do ritual, but if we never do it, how do we know they work? Plus, there's a lot of nuances that happen during ritual, as well as internally as well, that will give you that true knowledge. So it's like, whenever I do this third prayer, or this movement, or this hand signal, whatever it is in those moments that you will start to realize what works and what doesn't. And of course, giving you firsthand that experience working with these correspondences will, allow you to really recognize them. And in many ways, even the similar thing can happen with astrology as well, although maybe less so, because astrology is more on knowing things. But of course, there are applicable forms of astrology where, like, you'll see a transit, whether within a daily transit or even, a natal chart, whatever. And then you'll see, oh, hey, look, I see it play out. Like, oh, that Mercury is in that sign doing that. Oh, now I see it play out there. And of course, you even move on to more applicable forms, like, say, medical astrology with the cell salts as well. Granted, I mean, at that point, it is a bit more on just knowing the protocol right there, but then you can still see it play out in action. And in any case, so when it comes to magic, having that firsthand experience is very vital. Let's see, where was? Oh yeah, and so, yeah, the law of gender and the whole principle of sex as well, of the masculine impressing on the feminine, is how you get things to, to start bring into account. And look, and this insane principle even accounts for even in biological reproduction as well. I'm sure most of it here know how that works too. So you can think of it almost as, say, if the feminine principle is like, you can think let's like we can reflect this in carpentry as well. So if the feminine aspect is like the workstation, right? There's the tools, there's the workbench. It has everything you need. The only thing that's missing is the material. And the masculine principle is, of course, the one that brings the material. There's one that brings in the wood. There's another sex joke right there, but but yeah, when that is brought there to the workbench, then there you go. You can make, whatever it is you want to make, whether it's a sculpture, maybe you're making building materials and you're just shaping out the logs into planks. There you go. So as above, so below, is within, so without. The law of gender is um, something vital to that you need to understand. And of course, yeah, while it's not just bringing together masculine and feminine, but also respecting and honoring the roles that both play. And so, on whatever level you want to think of it, for heaven to happen, you need to respect them. And and also remember, what was it? I think it was last week as well. I remember you mentioned how, or I mentioned how there are certain things that maybe shouldn't change, right? Um, or like maybe certain rules that do need to be followed. This is one of them. I do like I would imagine, especially in many like new age movement circles. There's always been a huge emphasis of always focusing on just the feminine aspect, right? And yeah, sure, like it's easy to think that because, and even in scripture, it would say when Jesus talks to his disciples, he talks about casting the net on the right side. The sinkers would know that means, the right hemisphere, the emotional side, the faith side, which is, emotion. And yeah, absolutely true. Because it's that faith, like that gets you started, that intuition, that feeling. That's what got us started on. And this applies to almost any level. It's the mother, right? It gives birth. It's what gets us started and pushes us forward initially. Like I'm sure almost everyone who's on this journey on through the esoteric, whatever capacity, it all started. It's like I cannot logically explain it, but I do know there's that feeling that's drawing me. Like I can't explain it. I just know something's there, or I can feel something's there. Which yeah, absolutely. And then of course, as we go through that journey, that's when we start picking up on discernment. So that's where the masculine aspect starts coming in, starts refining it, starts discerning, right? Um, like sorry, some people may start with the new gauge stuff, right? But then, and of course, they try to put that heavy emphasis. It's like, oh, it's the feminine is the end all be all, whatever. But of course, what that's going to happen is ends up because it's the white light. Ironically, people are constantly looking into that white light, but they end up being blind because they forget the other aspect too, which is the masculine principle. Just because the masculine principle doesn't have direct connection to the divine, it does not mean that it plays no role. It absolutely does. In fact, well, like I said, you need both because we've got to remember in the biblical story of Adam and Eve, which one of the two got seduced by the snake? Because it wasn't Adam, because Adam cannot be seduced by the snake. That was Eve. Only Eve got seduced because she doesn't have the ability to reject. Only Adam does. So when Eve encountered the snake, she got tempted and she brought it over to Adam. Now it's usually this part, and this can apply to everyone, even within ourselves. So say you get tempted by something, whether maybe it's fast food, right? The emotion is like, oh yeah, but it tastes so good, it smells so good. Oh, it'll make me feel good in the moment. Probably give me the shits and the runs later down the line, and I won't feel so good later. But it's in that moment. It's like that heaven. You see that heaven, right? Or quote unquote heaven, that ideal, which is you can attribute it as heaven. Whereas the masculine can see what's in front of him and will be like, oh shit, no, yeah, I can see why you may want that, but that's not a good idea. It's not healthy at all. And at that point you can reject it. Or you can say it's like, you know what, fuck it, whatever. Let's say yes. So you eat the apple. And of course, because of that, you get cast out of the Garden of Eden. And that you can equate that to suddenly having some bad bowel movements down the line.
One thing that keeps coming into my mind, like having like the focus on the feminine in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's because it's been so imbalanced and so like masculine for, you know, decades, generations? So we need to focus more on the feminine to like balance it out.
Yeah, I would say that was a like it was definitely tried. It wasn't like a correction that was attempted where they
Yeah,
tried to bring in too much, but unfortunately they brought it a little bit too much,
too much. Yeah.
and in many ways I also think it's intentional too, um, because like I mentioned before, the feminine principle does not have the ability to reject. So when so many people are taking in so much of that and really throwing themselves off, they leave themselves vulnerable. And
Mm.
of course, you can also think of it as being stuck with the mother. Like, yeah, sure. When you start off a journey, and even in life, right? Of course, you have the mother. She's loving. She's nurturing. Of course, like of course, it feels good. Who can blame people for wanting to stay in that comfort? But of course, eventually, you do need to leave the nest. But that's where the father comes in, because well, the mother gives you the love, but the father gives you the wisdom. Not to say the mother has zero wisdom, but generally speaking, the father was the one that will give you the discipline, the values, so the mother can. But tells you like, hey, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, teaches you why, if presumably if he's a good mentor as well, teach you why you shouldn't do these things, and will teach you how to refine your path. It's like, hey, I really want to go down that path. It's like, okay, all right, cool. You want to go down that path? Great. Well, this is how you should be doing it. Try to avoid doing that. Don't go. Avoid going there because it's very tumultuous. Or you want to go down that way. Save your money now. Save up for that. Spend this. Etc.
Hmm.
And so yeah, and also it's been noted, even though this goes with heavily with conventional history, and most of us know conventional history is fucky at best, but even it has been noted that for every civilization that has fallen, like from Babylon to Rome, technically Rome never fell, but like I said, we're going with conventional. Actually, if you want to think of it this way, these civilizations, and can even refer even the same thing as Tartaria, that were thriving before. It's been noted that when they were at their peak, you can notice it in their art too, where the men that they would depict were always, burly. They were very masculine. They were strong, and of course the women were feminine, very limber. But then near the end, where the civilizations were close to falling, and you can even see the same thing happening today with America. Um, they've noticed that the men started becoming more lanky, more feminine, and the women were becoming much more warrior-like, more masculine. So that reversal and perversion of these universal mechanics, when that happens, that's when the fall starts to occur.
Mm.
Um, because like it's not respecting these mechanics and nor how they were supposed to flow, and thus as a result left them vulnerable. So you got things like many in many you got many uh I guess if you want to call them like social justice warriors or whatever, always screaming. It's like trying to push things like, say, like like modern day feminism forward, and just saying like, down with the patriarchy, down with all this, and whatnot. And there's a lot of bullshit being swiped around, but in any case, they're trying through these processes, and as well as even shit like the certain rainbow flag as well, and the whole uh, transgenderism shit going on, completely perversing everything. And if you want to think of it like this, so um, you would call things like this, like, either someone might even say dark magic or even Clyphothian magic, which is what I would call it. We're gonna get into this later, but real quick as well. But to quickly show what I'm talking about. So on the Tree of Life, we all know there's a Tree of Life, right? And this goes by many names, whether Mount Zion, Mount Olympus, or my personal favorite, Yggdrasil. This is where everything, is good. Like, where truth is truth, lies are lie, good is good, bad is bad, man is a man, woman is a woman, etc. And of course, with the law of polarity, where there's a Tree of Life, consequently, there's also a Tree of Death. So the Tree of Death, which is also known in Kabbalistic traditions as the Qliphoth, where everything is reversed, everything is hellish. So, like, one example would be, so on the Tree of Life, on the Sephiroth of Yesod, which is connected to the moon, on the Tree of Death, it'd be the Sephiroth of Lilith, which is the dark moon, and Lilith is also the mother of all monsters, which is why the moon is also a moon star, a monster, gives birth to monsters. Um, and so on this tree of death, and which is what they're trying to push on us, where everything is reversed, where lies are good, strength is reviled, weakness is celebrated, the masculine acts feminine, the feminine acts masculine, um, all these things that they're trying to push onto us, where everything is reversed. Mm-hmm. And so, consequently, this is how civilizations fell. Like, you'll notice now, mind you, I'm not saying these civilizations are good nor bad, but you've noticed that civilizations that usually had a more patriarchal kind of setup, or even traditional setup, I should say, usually lasted longer and were able to fend themselves. And those that were matriarchal ended up falling. Or either they ended up falling and end up taking over, or they're so small that they can't really do anything. They're just not worth conquering. Again, I'm not saying strictly good or bad, but you can see these mechanics still play out, and they know this too. These cabals, whether you want to refer them as the Khazarian Jesuits or whatever, same thing. So I know there's a big thing, but this goes to show once more the importance of understanding the roles that these two energies play, and why we need to bring them both together in their proper place in order for things to be made manifest. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And once again, like, I definitely know that there are some people out there that are not going to be very happy to hear that, for one reason or another as well. Like, reasons will be different. Where they don't like the whole idea of traditional gender roles or whatever, but that's just how it works. It's how it's always worked.
Yeah, even if you took like a crayon, and how did that crayon become a crayon? It took magic, because everything's magic, everything that creates. And if you looked at it, probably have the right ratio of like oil, which we could say is feminine, to like dust, which is masculine. Even stuff like that. Everything has just the right median of masculine, feminine.
Yeah. Yeah, and even think of it this way, where if you want to think of it, even in the elements, say fire and water, fire is masculine, it's projective, it provides heat. Yes, it has that tiny bit of a feminine principle, and is that you can add certain things to it, it starts emitting it, like incense. I do know there are certain elements you can add that will change the color of the fire too. It's actually kind of cool, but it still ends up burning that out. So it's projecting. Versus water, because water feminine, so men are fire, women are water. Water is a universal solvent. It just, whatever you add in, it's gonna take it. It absorbs and assimilates. And of course, these same things are still playing out within us as well. So, and there's no getting around it, right? Like, there are certain rules that are there for a reason, and if they're not respected, you're not going to have a very good time or have a lot of success in bringing things, because if you take a purity of one, so let's say pure darkness, you're not going to see much. But once you bring the contrast, hey, then suddenly you have something created. And even remember, I forget where I read it specifically, but part of the whole process of being a hermeticist or magician is to take that darkness, such as what I have here, and to bring in that light, that contrast in. So there you go. So whether or not, if obviously in the transcendental it'd be like, this darkness would be the masculine and that fire would be feminine. But redshift, blue shift world, darkness, subconscious, that's the feminine, versus the fire, the brighter light, I guess. I want to say white light, but that didn't sound entirely correct. Then next thing you know, we have that that source of light, that creation, that imagery, however you want to look at it. And so
yeah. Yeah, to get this idea out there that women are here to be women and
Hmm.
men are here to be men. You know, like you said, it might not be like it's controversial. This whole subject is very controversial.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, just to fall into that and then to find that balance within yourself.
yeah, and of course,
Once you do fall into that role, it might be easier to find that balance.
yeah, absolutely, and yeah, and like, and of course, depending on man or woman, like, it's of course that balance is not necessarily like a 50-50. It's like I would say it's 75-25, but of course we always have times when we adapt, right? Like there are times where maybe it's like, as an extreme example, say you have a woman who's doesn't have a man to protect her, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's all alone, and of course she might be in a situation. Obviously, it'd be better to avoid it, but where she has to defend herself, where she has no choice but to fight. Obviously, there's that point where she has to increase the masculine in herself. But of course, you got to remember these adaptations are meant to be temporary, not permanent,
Right.
right? Um, and even sometimes even vice versa for the men as well. Like, yeah, it might be times where you have to increase that feminine aspect, but it's not meant to be permanent either. Because because remember, like the universe works off of pressure mediation, right? Like Ken Wheeler would say, it's it's electromagnetic. When you increase, you have this container, but when you increase like a certain principle, you decrease the other.
Mm.
So if you increase your opposite, you decrease your native. But of course, depend, we are our vessels are meant to project a certain kind of energy. Even our consciousness are meant to project that certain kind of energy. And if you're completely off balance and you're projecting too much of one of the opposite, it's going to throw you off. It's going to affect you both internally, and consequently can also affect relationships too, right? Because of like, say for example, you have you have like a man and woman, and the woman is she has too many masculine traits, and I don't mean necessarily in the physical sense, but like personality wise, she has too much masculine. Then that's going to throw off the whole relationship, because of course if the man is, say, balanced, and of course this applies the other way around too, right? Say if the man is too feminine, it's going to throw out the relationship. That energies are not going to flow correctly. So when they try to come together, it's like imagine if like putting two bulls in the same pen. What are they going to do? They're going to lock horns, right? um just nothing good would happen. Yeah, nothing good would happen. Nothing really. I mean, sure, okay, technically they may not necessarily always lock horns, but think of it this way. So if traditional versus modern, right? Traditional would be like holding a plate, right? You're just holding the plate, not a big deal. Modern day, that's what's is like juggling plates, and sometimes those plates are on fire. Yeah, you might be able to do it, but it's very tumultuous, right? And
Very
especially,
draining. No wonder so many people are just have no energy and they're just drained most of the time, right?
yeah, yeah, and
They're juggling the plates
yeah,
rather than just holding it.
yeah, and of course, yeah, this manifests in many different ways. Sometimes even comes in the same sense of shaming too, where it's just like, unfortunately, I see this a lot around social media as well, where it's like the woman's always shaming the man for trying to be masculine or what. And of course, the man, that's a lot of shit to deal with, especially to get shamed by your partner as well, like that. That's
Mm-hmm.
of course that's gonna throw you off completely. And of course, if your own energies can't flow correctly in that relationship, then why bother? Yeah, it's not consequently even the other way around could also be the case as well. Like if our proper energies aren't flowing correctly, it throws everything off. That's why
Yeah.
vitally important. Whether you want to do magic or not, doesn't matter. These energies are always present, no matter what level of creation, transcendental, mundane, doesn't matter. They're always there. And yeah, always to be respected and honored. And there's a good way to do it and a bad way to do it too, right? Like someone say, like, oh, I don't want, like, you would hear women say, like, oh, I don't want a man to lead me or tell me what to do. You know what, like, because it could be even because like they had a bad experience, which all right, yeah, shit, that sucks because there's
Yeah, they might be traumatized, right?
yeah, which
Right.
yeah, and which of course, I mean, think of it like this as well. Um, so of course, like I said, the feminine does not have the ability to defend or to reject. Only the masculine does. So if a woman is on by herself, what does she have to do? She has to increase her masculine, and that becomes an adaptation. Which in the moment, Yeah, okay. Now it's a good adaptation. Problem is, it's meant to be a temporary one. So if they carry on with that all the time, of course they're going to develop more masculine traits, and so when they try to carry that around, that's going to throw them off. And because of that trauma, their own natural energy is trying to reset itself, trying to bring the feminine back out. The that trauma is forcing them to relive and increase their masculine, so they become at war with themselves. And that's, I mean, it shouldn't be any surprise to anyone that that's not good, right? Like, have fun trying to do anything productive if you're constantly fighting yourself. How can you possibly fight anything without yourself if you're just trying to balance those plates within and you're just tossing them around?
Yeah, so like in our relationship, we find ourselves like doing like the same thing. Like, it's not just me cooking or doing the dishes, and it's not just Nick building. Like, we do things together, and we like consciously try to keep it balanced. And I personally like enjoy building and using the tools and stuff like that. And I know Nick enjoys cooking. So like, can you go off of that a little bit?
Yeah, so, and absolutely, like relationship, like when it comes to like following these gender roles and these traditionals, right? Traditional gender roles in relationships, right? We don't necessarily have to be 100% dogmatic about it, right? Circumstances and nuances will always alter a few things, right? And like I said before, there's always going to be outliers, right? And what's important is, of course, not to assume one an outlier, but even tiny details. Say even, for example, of course, like say for the economy being what it is, like sometimes you need both parties to work, even though typically it's, yeah, sure, the man's going out to work, woman staying home and watching the kids and whatnot, if there is kids, or if not, just being the homemaker. But of course, sometimes it's not always the case. Sometimes both have to work, and then both have to come back and do both anyway. So yes, we don't have to be perfect about it. And of course, and like, everyone's relationship will be their own. The only thing I would say is, like I said, just be honest. Like, is your energies content and happy with it? And consequently, if you're in a relationship, is your partner's is too, because theirs is also just as important. Where you got to respect, both of yours, not just one. So yeah, like if a man likes to cook, I mean, I like to cook, right?
Yeah.
Nick likes to cook, and and if say if the woman wants to do a little bit hard hands-on work, yeah, that shouldn't be a problem.
As long as you're content and
Yeah,
happy, and you've discussed this, that you're both like happy with the situation, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
So yeah, like
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because you wouldn't want to like try to force it and like be like, well, I'm the woman, so I can't get my hands dirty or whatever.
Yeah, I seem to try to work a little bit away from that in growing up, noticing how, women don't really go in the garage and they're not really allowed in the garage and all that and stuff. But I want to empower her so she knows how to do everything that I know how to do.
Hmm.
And then same thing with all the kitchen stuff too. I want to know how to do all the things that she knows how to do. So we're both empowered, but our main role is leading. I will lead the
Right.
chainsaw stuff. I will lead it, and you will sort of lead, and that's how it
And
works
I'm
too. Because
learning, and vice versa.
yeah, because you're
Right.
kind of master of the kitchen, and I'm kind of master of the outside in our little relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. In many ways, you can also look at it like this, because I know some say would like, oh, the woman has no power in the relationship. She has not necessarily, because when it comes to the whole, like, oh yeah, people might look at a relationship and they say, yeah, the man's the authority and the one leading. It's like, oh yeah, he has all the power. The woman has to shut up and do nothing and go back, get back in the kitchen and whatnot. No, 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 no. Like, yes, the man's power does seem more overt. Both have power, but man's power is more overt. It's more obvious, sure, because he's fire. Fire's, I mean, if I were to light this up, this would be pretty obvious to see in the dark, right? But the woman is water. She's more subtle. She is powerful. She's not weak for being, for this is going to sound like a dirty word to some, but submissive or what? No, that doesn't mean she's weak. Her power is different. It just works differently, right? Like there's actually an Italian saying that I remember reading on a YouTube comment. I don't remember if I heard it before, but it pretty much says like, okay, if men are the head, so you can think of it as astrologically Aries, sun exalted, women are the neck, so Taurus, moon exalted. So men may be the head, but but the neck turns the head. I mean, think of it like this: you got a group of guys on a street level. You get one beautiful woman walking across. What's going to happen? They're all going to be looking. I mean, the power is very subtle, but it's still a lot of power, right? Like
The women turn the neck.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, the neck, yeah, the women, yeah, turn the neck, which consequently turns the head. So you're going to be turning hands. Same thing with emotions. Like emotions will get us, almost like they'll get us looking at a particular piece of art, or maybe an attractive individual. But then, of course, the head, depending on how strong it is at that point, can can override and be like, okay, that looks pretty enough. Let's look the other direction. Or if it's weak, it just doesn't turn. It just that's a lot of power. Even think of it this way, like. So typically, when the masculine, when the man even is say has a woman in his life that is that he loves and and of course loves back too, that in itself can be powerful because what that does to the man, it actually gives him a motivation he may never have before. Um, even love, that emotion can make him do a lot of crazy things that you may never been able to think so before. Whereas it's like that song, I forget what it's called, where it's like the power of love is a curious thing. It can make one man weep and another man sing. Like it's very subtle, but it's such a big thing. So yeah, just because the woman is the one that's typically or traditionally following the man, whether or not that one would do that in a relationship themselves, that's case by case, doesn't mean that she has no power. Her power is just different. It's just subtle. That's it. But it's still substantial, right? It makes a huge 9-day difference. Of course, yeah, naturally, yeah, the masculine power is going to be overt and obvious. I mean, imagine a guy just walking across and he's got a little bit of excitement going on in his pants. Yeah, you're going to notice that. It's going to be obvious. but and
you
of course,
don't notice that with a woman.
No, a woman's very subtle. Like you got to know what you're looking for, otherwise you'll just pass right by you. But nevertheless, yeah, the masculine and feminine powers both are powerful. They just work differently. That's it. And of course, we have to respect how they work too. If you try to change the other, like I said before, like if you don't respect universal mechanics, things are not going to work. Things are going to fall apart and explode. Then so
yeah. Another little thing I wanted to fit in there is well, say you have the man has a lot of Virgo in his chart. Virgo is the feminine sign, but it's the cooking sign. Well, then they're going to be cooking more often, so don't think it's incorrect. And then another thing in regards to the universal mechanics of male and female, if you look at the word atom and all is a tomb, and the fact that T and D are interchangeable, so at would be add, and would be dad mom. All is dad mom.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the birth chart, the cardinal cross, the ascendant, descendant, MC, and IC on the bottom, it's male, female, male, and female. So, and the 10th house is mom, and the 4th house at the bottom is dad. So it's dad, mom there on that axis. Mom, dad at the bottom, mom at the top, and then you're on the 1st house over here, and your partner's on the 7th house on the other side. So it's you're the dad, mom there, and your parent, and you came from the dad, mom up here. So it's Adam over here and Adam over here. So it's all Adam, all is a tomb.
Yeah. Yeah, Egyptians were probably onto something there. Just maybe. Yeah. And here's there's another thing I was talking about, especially when it comes to the journey of masculine and feminine as well. Where if the feminine is what gives us, is what starts off on our journey, gives birth to us, our actions, our life, whatever. And the father is the one that takes you to the end. You always got to think about this. Saturn, which is the father, is also the Grim Reaper, one that guides you to the end. So the mother may start you off on your journey, but the father is the one that takes you to the end, the one that helps you get to heaven, right? Or consequently hell, but that's a case-by-case basis. But
Saturn, moon, they're like opposites.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot.
Cancer, Capricorn.
Yeah, and then Moon is the bottom chakra, and then
Hmm.
Saturn is the top one, and then they're often reversed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and it's definitely a big subject to go in because, yeah, like I always said mysticism first. So in astrology, you'll obviously see this astrology, astrotheology, that and mysticism in general. You'll see this play out, and why it's heavily important to know this because these same lessons they're going to carry over to your ability to do magic, as well as knowing how it works. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't, well, you're not going to have a lot of luck.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this has been really like it's getting into my mind.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I hope anyone listening, can bring this into their lives and we're not here to like offend or anything with this discussion, just to share with you like how the magic happens. You need to have that maybe not like Nick said, that equal balance between masculine and feminine, but pretty equal, right?
Yeah, it'd be more so. It will, well, depending on what level where I guess we're talking about, would be like, yeah, it's like obviously depending man or a woman, it'd be like 75 to 25. And of course, everyone's ratio is going to be different, right? Like some will have a little bit more of the opposite, some a little less, but the important thing is to understand how these principles work within us as well, right? So,
Yeah.
and of course, how those principles work even in other people too. So, especially if you're getting into a relationship, whether you're a man going with a woman going with a man, it's important to understand how those energies within the other play as well. Because if you don't respect that, then, well, it takes two to tango, and that's not going to be a very good relationship. You're better off on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like each individual's different, like their birth charts, like maybe someone came into this world, a woman came into this world born, with more air in her chart than water. And so she's gonna maybe be a little bit more masculine than a woman that was born with more, water than air.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and
But I
yeah, it's
suppose you could
definitely
balance it out. Like, let's say you were a woman that were more masculine, had more of
like
the
fire, more
masculine
air.
elements. Yep. You could, balance it out by spending some more time in the water or something like that.
Yeah, I would definitely say if like obviously man or woman, depending on like your own elements that you were born with, it's you can almost like a challenge as well. Like, yeah, sure, if you allow these energies to overtake you, it's going to throw you off by default, right? But of
Mhm.
course, if you know how to utilize them and know how to properly channel them and like put them through the right lens, then yes, it's a powerful tool. So like say a woman with a lot of fire, for example, um, could become a very powerful individual. But if she doesn't control or doesn't learn how to properly balance, put that in the right place and channel it properly without it overtaking her feminine aspects, because like we're not meant to have like perfect 50-50 within us. It's you meant to have more of your own native than supposed to the opposite. But yeah, that can be very powerful too. Even subsequently the other way around too, like men with a lot of water, um, as well, like having a lot of turbulent emotions. Emotions can be a powerful tool, but if not channeled properly, it can be very destructive, right? But if you get that under control, if you learn how to counterbalance it with your own native energy, then that's something that will be an immense blessing. But of course, it's a challenge. But if like with anything within the Saturnine world as well, like the best blessings are usually the ones that you work for, right? Like, yeah, you have Jupiter giving blessings. And we'll talk about more as well when we talk about correspondences as well. And even in the same sense where this is, polarity comes into play, right? People always think that Saturn is all bad. I mean, yeah, he is the villain, right? But he also has his own blessings as well, that you would have to, that when you earn them, in some ways they can surpass even Jupiterian blessings too. Jupiter loves to give it to you right off the bat, which can be great. It's awesome. Um, but of course, they can also come with its own downside as well, right? Because Now it's just always going to be like instant gratification kind of deal. It's always like now, 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 which, understandable, especially when we live in this heavy world. And of course, doing magic, we're trying to circumvent that. So it may seem a little paradoxical to what I'm saying, but even still.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, for instance, like Jupiterian energy, like you could always have food on your table, but that might not necessarily be a good thing if you're constantly consuming, you know.
Yeah, because for
It
all
gets
the
expansive in your body.
yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and Saturn rules dry fasting, and Saturn rules the bones. And when you dry fast, the bones secrete stem cells, and the bones are cool and dry, just like Saturn. So Saturn has to do with immortality, but you got to work through it through discipline, which Saturn is, and time, which Saturn is. So, I mean, it's immortality, but you got to starve to get it, to that type of thing.
Yeah,
Go through the uncomfortableness.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then in many ways, I remember coming up with this way ago where it's one of the biggest lessons that we should try to learn is to learn how to reconcile between the Saturnian and Jupiterian energies as well, to create that Santa Claus as well. It's like, because Santa Claus, like, is a jolly, he's jolly, likes giving gifts, but he's also wears red. He's also in the winter. He's also the old man with the beard. So when we learn to reconcile these two energies, yeah, we get that Santa Claus archetype as well. And if you're good, he gives you presents. If you're bad, he gives you cold. Although if you're in the winter and the cold might not be so bad. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. We could keep going and going. I know, like, we've had conversations for hours on end before, but
Yeah.
for the sake of our listeners, we will cut this and we will join you again next week. Always enjoy learning what you have to share.
Absolutely. And yeah, and thanks for taking the time to at least listen to what I have to say.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Until next time.
Yes. Thanks for listening. We'll see ya.